everyone. I'm Illena Armstrong, and I am the president of Cloud Security Alliance. Welcome to the second day of our Agentic AI Summit. We have some industry stalwarts here with us today who are very active and supportive members of our Cloud Security Alliance AI Safety CISO Advisory Council. And we thought we would delve into this whole AI agent governance gap and what you all need to know, what CISOs need to know. We're actually basing this on a research note that came from our sister nonprofit, our 501c3 CSAI Foundation, which we announced at the RSA conference. And it really shared the many challenges, but also some solutions on what you need to be considering when it comes to, creating that foundational governance, risk, and resilience plan to secure your AI agent. So with that, I'm going to quickly introduce our panelists, and then we'll get on with our discussion. So first up, we have Rick Doten. He is the former VP and NC Health Plan CISO for Centene. He's now focusing on advising several venture capitalists and myriad cybersecurity startups. He's also on the board of advisors for several of these very startups and venture capitalist firms. So welcome, Rick. Jo Peterson, she's currently CIO of Clarify 360, an information services company, and she's also a member of the Forbes Technology Council, HPE's Independent Analyst Council, and CompTIA's Advisory Board for Infrastructure. Welcome, Jo.
Thank you.
And then, of course, Tim Youngblood. He's a four-time CISO, having served in this role for T-Mobile, McDonald's, Kimberly-Clark, and Dell. And he's now a top angel investor, serves on the advisory boards for several cybersecurity venture funds, and is a full board member for SDO and Ramsell Corporation. So glad to have you here. It's always cool talking to you and learning from each of you. There's a lot to discuss. We're seeing these AI agent deployments at breakneck speeds. Jo, in our paper, we talked about projection that 40% of enterprise applications will embed task-specific AI agents by the end of 2026. So when we're thinking about all the CISOs who are in our audience right now, do they know about every AI agent running in their environment? And what does it mean to really govern something that you can't see fully?
Well, see, that's the key, right? So I think governing the invisible requires a shift from seeing how the AI thinks to controlling what it's allowed to do. And it's just what you said. I hear the conversation of governing AI, agentic AI particularly, is like managing a black box. And this means shifting from sort of static upfront approvals to more of a continuous behavioral oversight. Because agentic AI plans, it acts, it interacts with tools independently, and governing it involves setting really strict, predefined boundaries rather than attempting to micromanage every decision.
And it's definitely like beyond that observability idea. It's this idea of planning ahead. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And also we talk a lot about how we thought 2025 was going to be the year of the agent. We really didn't have the reliability expected, the models probably weren't prepared until about October. We really didn't understand tool handling. We certainly didn't understand token use, and we didn't have a real good architecture for the agent harness. And the harness is a really important part that mentions all the things that Jo had said. It's like defining a control loop so you don't have these recursive things, maintaining state, maintaining memory, tool access, planning and error handling, when it goes wrong, how do we recover? These are all things that need to be part of the plan when you're defining it and not something that you kind of figure out after the fact. And I think that these are a lot of lessons we learned in the last 6 months to be able to have longer running agents.
Yeah, and I'll add this too, because governing something you can't exactly see is exactly where we were with Shadow IT 10 years ago. Right? This is old wine in new bottles. And we never fully resolved that problem either, by the way. So you think about where is AI being built? It's at developers, vendors, business units, security teams. and they're doing that without ability of being tracked. So what do you have? Sprawl, right? So it's everywhere.
Yeah, and it's also concerning because the AI agents are planning, they're executing, they're building sub agents, they're basically doing all the things that we can do at work, you know. And so I guess Tim, to follow up, one of the mentions in that CSAI Foundation research paper that we released, we mentioned this whole thing about the governance gaps, and the fact that NIST Center for AI Standards and Innovations, RFI, on security AI agent systems or securing AI agent systems, and I think that was made back in like January or something like that. We noted in the paper that that instance was a signaling event, right? That we're actually seeing the US government acknowledge that there's a gap because we have no guidance right now from NIST at this point. So I guess from your perspective, what does it tell us, or what is revealing about the fact that we had to have this sort of NIST acknowledge this gap that's still existing, and while we're deploying all these agents everywhere?
I think what they're saying is that we don't have a vocabulary yet, right? We don't know how to define this. And it's definitely a signal for practitioners to say, hey, don't wait on Washington to tell you what to do. And you're going to have to sit back and design your own playbook because it's not coming in the next 12 months. And it's not different than other scenarios we've been in this arena of trying to define some new technology that's coming to market. It's got to be the private sector that's helping to kind of set what's possible, and then government kind of coming in to say, okay, what's necessary.
Jo, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I think Tim's dead on. And I think as a long-term engineer, what I'd say is that if you take a step back and you look at the OSI model itself, the OSI model changes in AI. Every layer of that OSI model changes. So why would you think that a traditional cybersecurity approach would work is if the entire model, what you're trying to secure completely changed?
Yeah, though I think that a lot of the our normal controls still apply. We still need asset management, which is what we're talking about. We still need data protection. We still need identity management. We still need vulnerability management. We still need to collect insight to be able to identify alerts and things to respond to. But I think, Jo, where you're kind of getting to is that now there's probably like above the layer 7 layer of like all the things the humans were doing before. We need to understand their chain of thought. We need to understand when they're sharing things. We need to understand when they're trying to escalate privilege. We need to understand all these other areas, and I think that, as Tim had mentioned, the regulators are behind what we're doing, and we're trying to get things done, but they will still kind of fall back on do you know what it's there? Do you know what data it's accessing? Do you know what humans or accounts are being used? Do we know the permissions of those accounts? Are you able to reduce the blast radius if something goes wrong and identify it? Like, these are just fundamental things that still apply. I think some of the nuances we're still figuring out.
And so, I mean, to sort of take it back to the whole standards vacuum and leaving out CSA's AI controls matrix, right, which we released last year. It's got 240 more than 240 controls, and some of those absolutely address agents, right? But we concede, of course, we need to extend it for sure. A lot of organizations are depending on the very standards that we also map to, like the EU AI Act, the NIST AI RMF, ISO, right, 42001. But at the same time, they're still not extensive. So I guess, Rick, talk to us a little bit about where they break down, where these standards kind of break down when it comes to autonomous agents. And then in the interim, as Tim said, we got to build this plan. What are some of the basic steps folks can take to start, at least?
Yeah, and like with all frameworks, they're kind of they're layered. You know, we have risk frameworks, we have program frameworks, we have control frameworks, we have threat and attack frameworks. In normal, and that will be, you know, like NIST cybersecurity framework and 853, or the CIS security controls, you know, and MITRE attack. You know, so these are all kind of layered. In AI, we have them now, but they're kind of scattered. And up until recently, there was no control framework for being able to do it. So we had ethics frameworks from Europe and regulatory frameworks, and we have Maestro, you know, as a threat modeling framework. We have OWASP, that is a vulnerability management framework. We have the ISO 42001, which again more of a program framework, as well as the NIST one. And as you at CSA identified, that these were all put together before agents were a thing, but only within the last 6 months or so we have AIUC1 and SL5, which are specifically control frameworks. They are based on 853 and how those may apply to generally apply to agents, but you know, so if you're looking, so those are now just coming up in the last few months. And that was like where there was a gap in that, but we still need all of the layers of how they fit together.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just on top of that too, because I always thought as frameworks, as suggestions, you have to assign,
right,
you know, how they work for you and your environment. And
yeah,
the thing,
something instead of nothing.
yeah, exactly. In RMF and ISO 42001, the thing that's sort of common across them is that they were designed for human in the loop systems, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
That's the big point.
you know, and you know, you're at a point now where you know you got a model, data set, output, and agentic systems just kind of blow that away. You have these multi-step execution, as Rick was calling out previously, that you have to account for. You've got real-time, you know, tool calls. You've got sub-agent sprawling. You know, you've got decisions being made at machine speed now, and there's no check for a human to review. And so those frameworks are a little primitive under those kind of conditions, right? So, you know, AI was treated as a thing you evaluate, not a thing that acts, and that's the difference.
So that research note did mention that 92% of enterprise security leaders lack full visibility into their AI agent identities, and 95% doubt they could detect or contain a compromised agent. And I think we had some stats in there about compromises already, right? So here we are. Is this really a technology problem? Is it a process problem? A people problem? What do you think, Jo?
Oh, I think we're looking at a process problem, and Tim nailed it. It's caused by rapid adoption. And then I think, right on the heels of that, we've got this technology limitation, and it's that rather than a failure of people. So we've arrived at this crisis because AI agent adoption has outpaced governance frameworks, and Tim was alluding to that earlier, with agents deployed as shadow AI and unsanctioned by the powers that be. And these agents they have excessive static permissions that traditional human-centric security tools can't manage. That's where we're at.
Yeah, and I think that going back to implementation is I think that people are getting ahead of their understanding and their comprehension of how it works, just because it is working. And as we say, running is not the same as working. And as Tim alluded to, they up until recently don't have the ability to have long running tasks, and they start drifting and failing.
And I remember, so we were talking, I think, a couple of weeks ago about this too, and we're certainly hearing it from many of our members, and that is this idea that on top of the fact that many organizations want to be that AI first company, right? And the CEO and the board, they're all about it. At the same time, they're not necessarily understanding the implications. So part of that governance, and I'm sure, Tim, you had to deal with this too, right? When you were working with various and sundry organizations, right? How do you, as part of that governance planning and making sure that you put something into play that, teammates can follow, how do you make sure you're educating the CEO and the board properly too?
Yeah, that's I think that's something that's evolving right now, particularly on the board side. So I'm a member of the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD. And NACD is really going full throat on educating board members on AI and focusing in not just on the technology aspect of what AI is, but what are the outcomes that are necessary with AI. And I think it all starts, and we sometimes, lean really heavy on the AI tools and the technology and forget that this is really about business outcomes, right? And then you should be starting governance with like, what are the business cases that are really going to drive, the specific outcome, the revenue, the market share that we want as a company. And that's got to be at the forefront of your governance, right? Because that's going to drive everything else that makes sense for you to do. And I think that's where, leadership and board members need to kind of step forward and say, well, these are the outcomes we need, help us align to what the business cases that make sense for us.
And we're hearing they're failing. I mean, many companies, Rick, forgive my interruption, but many are failing to do that right now. We're seeing, and that's causing implementations to just not work.
Yeah, no, it's the J curve, right? It's like they're being directed to do something, and then they're asked, what's the strategy? And it's like, I don't know, just figure it out. And so, like Tim is saying, is they need to define what does winning look like? Are we getting more revenue? Are we increasing customer satisfaction? Are we increasing customer engagement? Are we increasing speed? Whatever the answer is that the business needs should be the North Star we're going toward, and that's not being provided. And they're trying to do something. So they get tools, they start doing things, they start, like trying to code or do something. And they're not getting anywhere, and it's taking them a long time. And then at the end of the month, they burn $50,000 worth of tokens. They're like, I didn't budget for that. And then they go to the board and it's like, okay, what did you guys do? It's like, oh, nothing. We wasted a lot of time. We wasted a lot of money. We haven't shown anything for it. And that's the unfortunate, at the bottom of the trough of this little J curve. And that's where a lot of organizations are right now, unfortunately, because there was that, hey, this is what we're trying to go for and what success looks like.
And there needs to be an intake process too, because that's something I think we miss. And questions I think you're going to see board and senior leaders start to ask about, what is the AI committee actually providing for us? What does it define? How does this force AI for the company? How do we prioritize those use cases, right, to what's important? These are all the things I think, have to be established in order for you to even say you have governance.
Getting a little bit granular then too, AI agents, they hold delegated credentials. They're making authorization decisions in real time, right? Got the sub agents. And then we have traditional identity and access management solutions. They're not built for this. So what does a realistic path to least privilege access for these agents actually, what does it look like for a large enterprise, Jo?
Oh, I think that we're seeing this shift happen. And the shift is from static identity-based IAM to more of a dynamic, intense-based authorization. I think traditional tools are really bypassed by agentic workflows. We've all sort of sat here and talked about that. So enterprises are adopting this, if they can, a control plane approach that manages permissions in real time and treats agents as distinct identities. And I'd love to hear what y'all see, because I'm seeing all kinds of approaches to these distinct identities, right? So, and it's like, yeah, everything from badged employees to just like fractional employees, like all kinds of things.
A is mentioned, and it says so when you're in Copilot or something and you're creating agents, like, hey, just to let you know, it's inheriting all of your rights and privileges, which, we learned from the cloud 10 years ago about attribute-based access. It's like what you need for the time you need to do the thing that you need to do, but it's harder to do that. And so I think that is kind of like the big roadblock is that like, okay, well, and it's not something that identity management teams are set up to do, because agents are happening by individuals at time kind of spinning up. This is somewhat similar, but more complex than the non-human account issue that we went through in the last 5 years with all with all the service accounts. And so, yeah, it becomes a challenge. And that goes back to the governance of how are we going to manage, how are we going to apply and, provision and deprovision and adjust rights to the agents.
Yeah. And I just think you just have to start with the assumption that every agent has too many permissions, right? And I mean, most certainly does, right? And to Rick's point about the whole machine identity and non-human identity, that's another problem I don't think we've solved yet either, right? And agents are leveraging those. And, they can be webhooks, they can be API keys, most certainly service and process accounts. They're all over the place, and we've got to get a handle on that too. So, you've got to scope credentials and identify what's the minimum required for each specific task, and then really focus on rotating aggressively. Which you're going to have to refocus some of what the identity team does, honestly, and never allowing an agent to inherit any kind of standard access from human accounts too, which again is going to be a task. May require different types of tools to get there. And it's in some cases it's going to be a re-architecture project, right? There's just no shortcuts to this stuff.
Yeah, and then I mean that kind of brings us into this the point of the audit trail, right? This idea that one of the figures being touted is about 20% of organizations are trying to monitor, or they are continuously monitoring agent to agent interactions, which I have to admit, when I saw that figure, I was a little bit surprised. I mean, it's low, but I was thinking it'd be like 10% maybe or doing that or lower. So what is good monitoring, and how do you make sure that you have a accurate, steadfast audit trail?
Yeah, it's like with everything new, it's like we just make it work first and then we'll figure out how to like audit and secure it, unfortunately. And we have an opportunity to improve what we're doing today, because a lot of the things that humans are doing are not audited or reported or known about. So a question we always get well, what if one agent gives data to another agent to have access to? Like, humans do that every day and there's no record of it. So we have an opportunity to start logging all of these different, and also the intent and also the chain of thought of why it did that, and putting it, which is of course a whole other discussion about logging and monitoring and alerting and all the stuff. But we have the opportunity to be able to log everything it does, everything it's doing, why it did it, and which is better than what we've been doing with humans for generations. Whether we're doing or not, it's different. Yeah.
I also think a big part of this, along with kind of understanding and discovery where agents are, and AI for that matter, is ownership. I think there should be clear ownership for agents, and that has to be part of your monitoring process, right? And it's a difficult thing to do, but to me, ownership comes whenever you know who to go to when something goes wrong, right? When something goes wrong, there is a name, a person could say, okay, you need to take responsibility for this, and we're going to go get this fixed right now, right? Or addressed. So I think that's a big part of what monitoring must be part of.
Yeah, the accountability piece is one that everyone brings up, because what if it does something wrong?
I mean, yeah, especially with the creation of the sub-agents, absolutely.
Yeah, and somebody's got to answer the question, why did the agent do what it did, right? And it's generally not the security team.
Yeah, and the analogy I use is, we are now the stewards of these agents, and just like, and using a dog now, like if your dog bites somebody, it's not the dog's fault, it's your fault. And so, but we have a stewardship over the dog, which gives the dog certain rights, that we will not abuse it and we'll protect it and all those things, and we're taking care of it. So we need to also figure out, like, well, okay, if we're a steward of these agents because we're ultimately responsible, then what are our responsibilities and its rights to maintaining that it will be able to do the things it needs to do and has infrastructure and power and access and all this stuff to be able to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So another stat, which did not surprise me, 64% of companies above 1 billion in revenue reported AI-related losses exceeding $1 million in 2025. When you have that incident involving an AI agent, that reconstruction of what happened, that just goes back to the audit trail. And then I guess one other question that I saw, I belong to a group of female CISOs, and a question that came up right after discussing this point was, what about insurance? Are insurance companies catching up, and what are the implications of that as well? So, who would like to take that? Jo, you want to try?
Everything that's all new that's new is like, yes, look at your insurance policy and make sure that they're adding these things because it may not be part of the scope. Right. Or there may not be, depending on their policy, it may reach to certain types of things. And it may be an errors and omissions policy, so as we know, as as CISOs, if like it's not the cybersecurity policy covers this a little bit, and there's 15 other policies we already had that cover almost every, theft and errors and omissions and all these other things. So it's kind of like looking at what is going to be covered. But yeah, it's an excellent point.
So I teach at the University of Oklahoma, cybersecurity. So I have a whole session about cyber insurance and the emissions that typically come up on, them not counting nation state attacks as actual attacks, right? For example, you know, yeah. So this is one of these areas where, you have to, for an agent incident, you're required to reconstruct a decision tree of some sort, right? Not just a log file. I mean, that's generally what they want. If you can't answer the question, what instruction chain led to that action, then you cannot do the root cause analysis and then have defendability, I think, from the insurance perspective. And so that's a different, type of analysis, and not just insurance, like regulators also asking for this too, right? So, the incident response team readiness for AI agent has to be designed to kind of assess that kind of issue before an incident, not after it.
Though to be fair, I think most of these incidents so far have been basic, credentials that were weak or taken, misconfiguration MCP servers, data that had access, OAuth weaknesses, things like that. I mean, to Tim's point, yes, when we get to the agent did something bad, all of that comes to play. But I think that's probably a smaller portion of the reality.
And we haven't even gotten into the idea of, the idea of this whole agentic AI environment and when a breach really affects PII and the legal implications of that and what individuals will do and what kind of suits we'll see, that kind of thing, brand damage, and then how that might impact the decisions the company might make later about their use of AI for the time being,
What about simple stuff like, I don't know if y'all caught it, but there was one where the agent gave a price of like $29 for an airline fare. It was like hallucinating. So that's got to be part of the loss too, when the agent makes up a price that you're like, where did that price come from?
Yeah, no, that was the Air Canada one from a few years ago that we dug into that a couple of years ago, and that was, it came up with policy, and there's other examples where the chatbots would come up with policies because when it's explicit not to, and in that particular case, it did go to the court, and they were liable. It's like, listen, you're responsible for this, the accountability thing we talked about.
Yeah, and it also highlights just the where we are today, because agents don't necessarily do a great job bringing in context, right? They're focusing on rules, right? There was another example that I'd heard where they had an agent controlling inventory and they were optimizing inventory, doing the great thing they were supposed to do until they got to the wine, and they had all these legacy wines that weren't moving, right? And it's like, we got to optimize the price for this. So it started selling wine at on the dollar prices, and the company lost like $100,000 from that.
Anthropic, had this AI driven vending machine. They had it in their office like last summer, and then I think it was Wall Street Journal, New York Times kind of had it running, and you can go back and look at the readout of it. It's really interesting, but similar to what Tim had said. But yeah, no context, the things that's going to be real important as we're making agents run longer and do more things is providing the intent and the context and keeping that up to date so that it's fed with what is really good data. I mean, it all becomes a data issue to be able to keep these things running.
So let's talk about some practical steps. So I think we, CSAI Foundation made these recommendations. One of the first was build that AI agent inventory. We've touched on that, I think, earlier in the conversation. But I mean, how hard is that in practice right now? Because we're talking about people just using these. They might be building agents. People are going rogue, as they have in the past. So what are some of the obstacles, and how could, maybe the cybersecurity team kind of get a handle on that? What are some practical first steps?
Yeah, they're not great answers on this one, Elaine. I have to say, this is without, specialized tools, right? Because when it comes to agents, they can literally be anywhere, right? They can be on the desktop, they can be in SaaS, browsers. Unless you have some ability to search across all of those domains, it's a difficult thing to do. And you know, taking a step back and saying, okay, let's where do we start with those things that are most dangerous to us and focusing on that is really the start. And then how do you give kind of an amnesty program to your enterprise to say, hey, we've been out here experimenting for 3 years, and I know we've spun up a lot of stuff, but what do you need for the business to work and to drive the capability that we've committed to, right? And then let's start there, and that's our inventory, and then everything outside of this is something that probably shouldn't be running.
Yeah, and the challenges he's got, Tim's alluding to is that it's also not an agent is not like an executable. It's things in different places that are acting. It's some code here, it's some Python sitting here, it's a tool access here, it's a context file there. It's different things. Maybe talk to an MCP server or two, and so most people are not doing asset management well. And now we're adding a lot more complicated entity to track on top of that. And so I agree that it's going to take some specialized techniques and tools, which are not as mature yet to be able to see. It's even unlike the cloud, where in the cloud, nothing happens without being logged. And I just go to AWS and it tells me everything that was spun up and all the tool use, everything like that. It is multiply distributed, as well as if you have multiple models that you're using, you can't even go look at that. So it is a big challenge to do that, but we agree it's the first thing we need to do, is because we can't protect we don't know about.
And I just say, don't lean to it being a technical issue. It's a leadership challenge, right? You got to get in there, get people to know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and call people out to the table when you see things that aren't working right, and then for leadership to back you up.
That's what I see, Tim. I see AI forcing conversations that maybe weren't being had before, and I think that's a good thing.
What about the highly regulated sectors right now? We've got finance, of course, you've got government entities. I guess I'm just wondering, are you hearing, how are they dealing with organizations using agents, and then and making sure that they might be compliance ready, whatever that may mean? What are you hearing? Are you hearing anything from these folks, Jo, about that, or concerns about regulation coming down the pike?
I think they're more cautious than some of the others. What I'm seeing are these really small scale pilots that are easier to launch and manage and sort of track. And I think that we have a different problem that Tim alluded to when we're talking about production environments, right? So they're not rolling this out into big production environments, at least that I'm seeing. I don't know what the other gentlemen are seeing.
Yeah, and coming from healthcare and being in the baking capital, they're still very limited. And a lot of regulators are about, particularly the bias of the outcome is an important aspect of it, access or the improper use of the data, for PHI or PI, financial data. And so it really is, the regulated entities are using pilots, as Jo is saying, and trying to figure things out, but nothing really is automating, other than but it's also kind of it's weird because we've been using AI for years, but they've been predictive models or machine learning models that are very well tooled, that we created ourselves, and we have the provenance of how it got there.
Yeah, and I think different agencies are probably more heightened than others in those arenas. I think financial services and healthcare, being the top two. The FDA has jurisdiction over any agent touching a clinical decision support system, right? So that's a high risk area for them. The SEC is really focusing on AI driven trading and disclosure processes, right? So that's another area, right? So they're all closely watched right now, and they're assessed, and they're looking at scenarios that concern them and digging deeper.
You mentioned, I think you're the one who mentioned earlier in the conversation, this idea of AI committees, AI agent committees, or just AI committees within companies. How often is that happening? And I guess who are on the committees, or who should be on these committees within these companies, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, committees are easy to spin up and hard to keep together, right? So I would say there's some benchmark data that suggests that 40 to 60% of large enterprises have some form of sort of AI committee or AI governance body. Now, as you talk to the people that are aware of these committees and ask them how effective they are, that's a different story. Because they're trying to align, big policy things. They're not necessarily focusing on the execution and the how stuff gets done, more the big scheme what. And these committees, at least the ones I know, but they don't meet very frequently. I mean, sometimes it's poorly reviewed on a slide deck, right? And
But I mean, there will in your mind, there will be a time. Do you all think there's going to be, especially in these large organizations, these committees are going to have to exist to kind of help with that strategic direction, Joe?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you saw this happen in cloud, right? And of course, it's going to happen with AI. But you're going to see, like Tim said, there's got to be, and I think, I'm not sure which gentleman mentioned it, maybe Tim. There has to be executive sponsorship for this to really work. That's the bottom line. Like, we didn't see these cloud centers of excellence really take off in organizations until we had an executive say, "Hey, how come we're spending so much on our monthly bill?" Right? Something happened and some trigger for that executive to go, "Wait a second, let's put some internal guardrails around that." And I think that's what we're going to have to see.
Yeah, and I was on that when I was in, a large healthcare company. I was on the AI steering committee, and then there was the governance committee, and so we had steering committee was smaller, that had like tactically what are the things we're going to doing. The governance committee was the approval body, as Tim kind of referred to, that had the teeth, and it was made up of just the business and legal and HR and compliance and all the different folks, understand like what are the nuances of it when we're starting to apply, and when people are coming for programs that they want to do to get approval of, hey, we want to do this with AI. And a lot of large organizations have this onboarding process to submit, hey, I want this thing to be created, or here are things that I'm creating. What do you think? So, but I think the larger mature companies have been doing that. The problem is that I think many organizations are doing it just, as kind of Tim's alluded to, for show, to have theaters say, do you have an AI governance committee? Yes, we do.
So we're getting close to time, and I want to leave some time to ask each of you a different question to help kind of close this out. Joe, I'll start with you. So if a CISO in this audience is starting from zero on their AI agent governance, no inventory, no real specific controls anywhere, no monitoring, they're just like needing help now. What is the single most important thing they should be doing in the next 30 days?
I love this question because it made me think. So the single most important thing that I think is to systematically discover and map every AI agent in the enterprise. And that's both the sanctioned and the shadow ones, to create initial inventory. Because we talked about it early. You cannot secure what you don't know about. Agent sprawl is significant, it's fast growing, and without this reliable inventory, you can't put in any downstream controls, right? So I would say 30 days, right? You launch your discovery, and that means you put in an automated discovery tool like a CASB or browser security. You centralize an agent registry, so you create this central database that documents the owner. Tim talked about that. Who owns it? What's the purpose of the thing? What data access path does it cross? What's the model type? Is it GPT-4? Is it Claude? For every single agent, you define your high risk areas. So you look for agents that have broad access to enterprise databases like Snowflake or Jira, or the ability to autonomously initiate external actions, like sending an email, or heaven forbid, initiating a financial transaction, because they do that. And then you publish an interim policy. So you draft a high level, safe prompting guide that forbids inputting. Now, I know it doesn't go very far, but at least it's a start. You want to have something that says, no, you can't put in confidential information or public data into public AI, right? You want to at least start because you've only got 30 days.
So Rick, that paper we've been talking about, the core argument is that organizations can't wait for standards bodies. Real risk going on right now. NIST, any kind of framework we're seeing from NIST, probably a good year away. So how do you build something durable today under that kind of uncertainty? That also, I would imagine you need to make sure you can evolve too, eh?
Yeah, and it goes back to the fundamentals again. What we keep talking about, like as Jo very eloquently mentioned, it's like, let's get the assets down. And then let's figure out what data are they accessing, what kind of processes, what kind of things, accounts are being used, what the data flow is, what's the sensitivity of the data. Let's at least get visibility, context, and comprehension about what they're actually doing. And this was a challenge when we were talking about if there are more black box like, if someone vibe coded a thing, an application to do with stuff that we don't know what the database and the data flow and all the things are behind it. It's just a black box, as opposed to one that we actually have the understanding of how it got there and all the pieces to it. So getting visibility is the important part to be prepared for when that comes. And then it's just a reporting exercise, because we as CISOs, we know how to protect our organization. We know the business risks we're trying to protect. We've gone through all of the ISO or the NIST or the PCI or the CIS or all the controls. So they're all 80, 90% the same. This will probably be 90% the same with some nuances. So do the basics.
So Tim, I'm leaving the last question for you. We're looking out, maybe a year and a half, 18 months, right? What does good look like? And what is that realistic benchmark for a well-governed agentic AI environment? That the CISO is feeling comfortable touting to the board, right? Touting to clients, customers.
So Illena, with a name like Youngblood, I'm used to going live, so no surprise there. Story of my life, but it's a lot of what we have said. I think it's full agent inventory, but with a continuous discovery process. All right, and it's a focus on less privileged access. That's got enforced and real time monitoring as part of the agent decision chain. It's agent specific incident response playbooks that have been tested. And it's a governance artifact that you can hand a regulator with confidence to say, this is how this works and this is how we protect it. And that's the bar. I mean, it's achievable for organizations that start now, I think at 18 months. It may feel like an impossibility and far away, but if you use the tools you have now, add to your stack, start to focus on an AI agentic control plane to start to control all AI, I think you get there. And then you kind of add in some things down the line around, agent red teaming, focusing in on developing like agent honeypots, ensuring you have real time run protection across all your agents. All those things are kind of like, that's the advanced level that you get to, and you got this under control.
So I definitely want to thank all of you, Tim, Rick, Jo. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the contributions to CSA, and we'll get you going with the CSA AI Foundation as well. So thank you all.